Members, at the break, we were debating the mental health bill 2022. I presume we are now ready. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is my great honor to once again speak on behalf of the magnificent people of the Exumas and Ragged Island constituency. I'm delighted, Madam Speaker, to bring the agenda back to the discussion on the Mental Health Bill 2022. Madam Speaker, I address this House in full support of this bill, which will update legislation that is over 50 years old, as my colleague from Freetown referenced earlier. Let me firstly commend Prime Minister Davis on his leadership on this important initiative, as well as my colleague, the Minister of Health, Dr. Michael Darville. I also address this House with a sense of relief that our administration is putting in place a regime that will begin to address what we all know is a critical, long-standing problem. So this bill today is more than just addressing some of the issues in providing care and protection for persons suffering from mental illness, but it is an opportunity for us as legislators to bring awareness to these issues. This is also an opportunity to be talking about mental wellness, not just mental health. We seize this opportunity to sensitize our people that mental illness is real. It's not a joke. It's not funny. And that we no longer refer to our healthcare facility, Sandlands Rehabilitation Center, as the Crazy Hill or other derogatory terms, but in progressive terms as a health and wellness facility. This is an opportunity for all to acknowledge that people who, through no fault of their own, may suffer a traumatic experience. Dorian victims and survivors, for example, as referenced earlier, need ongoing mental health support. I am happy to know that many of my colleagues will speak to this, and this is front and center in all of our minds. Mental health problems and the associated effects have plagued us for many years, but it seems more apparent now than ever. So who among us can pretend to be so blind as not to see the homeless who are wandering aimlessly on some of our streets? Who can pretend we do not have family members or we know people whose families cope with these challenges? Who can pretend not to see those who are clearly disturbed amongst us? Who can seriously say to themselves that the increasing reports of suicide are not worrisome and heartbreaking? And what we see only speaks to what lies beneath the surface that we do not see. These are serious issues that need to be addressed in a serious manner. Many ridicule the mental illness and the hopelessness we sometimes see with addiction, for example. Many act like it's okay that they do not need our help. In fact, they may often not know they need or want our help. But it is our duty as Christians, as humans, as responsible citizens to try and help them. We see it on Bay Street every day with vagrancy. Persons living on streets may not necessarily just be poor. They may suffer from mental illness, but we'll never know for sure unless we address it. When I see people living under bridges in wealthy countries where I travel, it forms an impression. In the Bahamas, we aspire to be known as a country that operates with compassion and is known for how well we look out and we look after the least amongst us. Yes. The bill itself addresses vagrancy in some aspects, but I contend that to deal with vagrancy in our country, we see and we require serious ongoing collaboration between law enforcement, social services, and our Ministry of Health. It requires active support from families where possible and community stakeholders as well. We are called to act. Not just the government, all of us who share this society. Madam Speaker, this legislation reflects a much-needed modern framework, reflecting current needs and a progressive and humane approach to mental illness and mental well-being. This is the start of our action. And it's not just to help those without means, because they're not the only ones who suffer. Any one of us can find ourselves suffering from an episode or extended mental health condition. You heard the statistics earlier today. But mental health and mental illness does not discriminate. Old or young, rich or poor, black or white or whatever, physically fit or out of shape, emotionally strong or emotionally frail, it does not matter. As we have come to understand, any person can suffer from mental illness, the same way any of us may find ourselves physically ill. And our Prime Minister pointed it out so well. To seek help for mental illness is a show of strength, not weakness. I recall my friend Roger. From the outside, everyone would have considered him to be living on the top of the world. He was 54 years old. He was worth $200 million. He earned $20 million to $30 million every year. He was the former president of a chamber of commerce. He mentored young men in an inner city where he grew up. He coached kids baseball. He mentored young budding entrepreneurs. He was a private pilot. He had a beautiful family, a house in an exclusive gated community in the USA, and he had a vacation home in Exuma. How could anything possibly go wrong with that? One night I received a call from a mutual friend who told me that Roger took his life in his garage whilst his family was inside watching TV. I was troubled for weeks, asking why, only to learn weeks later that Roger struggled with mental illness. And he suffered in silence, drawing closer to doing something horrendous while the world marched on around him. This legislation is needed for people like Roger and all the other people we too often let slip from our gaze. This bill signals our recognition that as a society, we must continue to transform the way in which we address and treat mental illness and mental and emotional well-being. And it acknowledges that we must continue to move away from ongoing stigmas and taboos regarding mental health. Too often, we either make light of mental illness or we view it as something to be ashamed of, or we simply ignore it whilst persons around us, the very people we care about, end up suffering in silence and avoiding the necessary treatment and attention they need. So many people see mental illness and addiction as a moral issue or a lifestyle choice when the issue of disease is no other different from a physical disease such as diabetes or cancer. We must demystify these stigmas and normalize mental health as being just as important as our physical health. We have learned so much more about mental health and well-being since the current law was enacted in 1969. We understand much clearer that mental illness is not the fault of the person with a particular condition. We appreciate it much more that it's not a sign of mental weakness or inability to cope. It is not something that people can just get over with stern admonishment or some herbal tea or the casting out of demonic spirits, as some people say. Mental health is real. Mental health is not a choice, but often a genetic disease that, if diagnosed and treated properly, will more often than not allow someone with the illness to lead a healthy and productive life. Let me say that one more time. If treated properly, it will more often than not allow someone with mental illness to lead a healthy and productive life. That is the message I hope that will be remembered if treated properly. And that's what we are embarking to do today. Madam Speaker, the fact is our legislation had not kept up with neither our current understanding of mental health nor the mechanisms that are necessary to address the matter in a way that ensures proper treatment for those affected while protecting both the rights and the interests of these persons. I am pleased to say that this bill does that. It follows global best practices and ensures that the interests of persons facing these situations are protected, and where necessary, their interests are enhanced. Madam Speaker, I am no health expert, far from it, but I believe this bill will give us the framework to help so many people in need and give them the rights they deserve. Of course, enhancing state services means that more funding will be required, and one of the key components will be funding the treatment on par with other health diseases. And to that end, we must continue to invest. We will need perhaps a new facility in Nassau and perhaps in Grand Bahama, facilities that can also deal with those suffering from substance addiction. We'll also need to expand the existing facility on New Providence. We must also ensure access to medical care across the Family Islands as well. Just today, as referenced by one of the honorable members earlier, we see the acting corrections commissioner saying he has 80 mentally ill inmates he cannot get into Sandilands. And though I am pleased to hear that they're looking for solutions with more facilities, we must ensure that mental patients are not in with the general population in prisons either, even though I know some of them are a danger to themselves and others. So there are a myriad of complex issues, and I am delighted that we begin the heavy lifting today to address many of these issues that confront us. I also hope that we will get to a place where patients at different stages can get treatment with dignity. Who amongst us can pretend that access to suitable health care in this specific subject in mental health is easily accessible? Who amongst us can pretend that access to suitable health care for mental illness is easily accessible? Who amongst us can pretend that the process for accessing Sandilands is sufficiently streamlined? Who can pretend that access to sufficient and adequate medicine is always available? We know we're not where we need to be, and therefore we're taking steps to address the myriad of issues. We must also get to a place where mental patients can learn trades so that they're not discriminated against when they try to find work, so they can assimilate into a normal society. As I said, the heavy lifting will require more funding, so the government cannot do this alone. There are things the private sector can do. It can offer tolerance in recruiting persons with controlled mental illnesses. It can offer employee assistance programs. The same way we encourage annual physical medical checkups, we must encourage mental health checkups. So one day we will move the talk from mental illness to mental wellness. We can have and encourage more forums and doctor talks and living and working in the Bahamas with mental health challenges and on the availability of medication and treatment for mental wellness, and on how to cope as a caregiver or how to cope as a sibling of a person with mental challenges, or a wife or a husband or a child or a grandchild. We don't need the government to do all of this. We continue to call on NGOs to consider this as a serious call to action. We should also give our police officers adequate training on how to deal with people with mental challenges and or developmental delays. This training will ensure that they are not injured in trying to navigate the best outcome for all involved. Those who live successfully with mental illness and those who are patients or former patients who function in society should also be unafraid to share their truth with a mission on helping others. So today, this is a call for action. And there is something that my wife and my former business colleagues have been looking into doing on our part. The World Health Organization has partnered for a few years with different NGOs to deal with mental health. And creating such an NGO is something they are exploring with my unflinching support. Yes, we all must do our part. There are so many struggling with these issues that I do not pretend that this bill will fix these things overnight. However, this is groundbreaking legislation. And this bill is a move in the right direction in providing those who suffer in silence and those whose suffering is clearly on display to get the care and the protection they need. And therefore, it is with high commendations for the Minister of Health, the Office of the Attorney General, healthcare professionals and officials, all who have contributed to this bill across our country, and all those who work in the industry, the healthcare industry, day in and day out, to deal with this overwhelming challenge. We thank them for all that they do and all that they have done. So we are no stranger to the problem of mental illness in our country. We heard the statistic earlier by the acting Minister for Health, that it is predicted, that 1 of 4 persons in the world will be impacted by mental illness. This is a serious issue. It's no joking matter. And today, we do our part. But it's also a call to action for everyone across our country to participate in helping us to promote mental wellness. It is with a great sense of pride that I support this bill today. And I truly believe that this bill will help many across our country. We must not forget our children. We must not forget our youth. They also experience anxiety. They experience and they suffer from grief. They've had a terribly difficult time during the COVID pandemic. They've had a terribly difficult time during Hurricane Dorian. Yet they play, and we think they're okay. But we must never forget them. Children have stress too. Madam Speaker, it's my pleasure to speak on behalf of the people of Exumas and Ragged Island. May God bless the Bahamas. May God bless Exuma. May God bless Ragged Island. May God bless all of us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member Asmini. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Gates.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand today to enthusiastically support the Mental Health Bill 2022, and I say, to God be the glory. This is a very exciting day for me because everywhere I go, I'm an advocate for mental health. It's been a central part of my platform in Golden Gates and an issue that I lend my voice to on a national level. The bill will finally modernize our mental health legislative framework and bring us to a 21st century mental health sensibility and sensitivity here in the Bahamas. As the Minister of State for the Public Service, I'm excited at the prospect of change that the new mental health bill will bring about in other needed areas of reform. I believe the time is now for us to even look at the Employment Act and how we can add mental health days for public servants and employees. These would be days off from work completely different from physical sick days off. Such a change would reflect our increased emphasis that is going to be placed and is being placed on mental health as being equally important as physical health. And as we get more serious about mental health, I believe it's time that we also start considering that change. Employees' performance on the job is often linked to where they are mentally. As employers, we need to always remain conscious of the fact, especially in consideration of all of the crises we've faced in our nation and our world. Madam Speaker, regionally, statistics confirm that up to 60% of those with mental health illness are not receiving treatment. Many people within the Caribbean fear coming forward due to the stigma or taboo surrounding mental illness, and as a result, they struggle in silence. It is amazing that such a stigma exists because mental health illness is so common. A few years ago, PAHO predicted that the number of people with mental health illness in the Caribbean would increase by more than 50% by 2020 due to aging populations, the effects of climate change, the economic and social decay. Now, let's imagine the impact since the COVID-19 pandemic, which has had on the region. That estimate is likely far below our current reality. Just considering the mental health impact of illness and death that was experienced during the pandemic is a great cause of concern. Then we should take into account the effects of isolation due to lockdowns and curfews, as well as the increased financial hardship that many persons experienced. It's hard to imagine a scenario where mental health illness did not increase significantly. There's also the unprecedented learning loss that occurred during the transition to virtual learning. So many young people throughout the Bahamas simply gave up out of hopelessness. In Grand Bahama and Abaco, there are still people coming to terms with the destruction wrought by Hurricane Dorian. Published accounts by healthcare providers in the aftermath of the storm indicated the extent of the mental health challenges. Clinicians describe signs of acute psychological distress and grief reactions, as well as intense fear and anxiety. A report by a visiting psychiatrist stated, and I quote, "Assessments with validated screening measures found that high proportions of Dorian survivors seen at the clinic had significant symptom elevations for major depression, generalized anxiety, or PTSD," end quote. And this is the reality for the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama. It is a reality that only can be addressed through mental health reform, increase resources aimed at mental health care, and improve access to those resources. Madam Speaker, we are living in some very serious times, and many people are also turning to self medication to make it through these hard times. Alcohol abuse disorders are identified by PAHO as the single most burdensome mental health related challenge plaguing Bahamian men. This is not to mention the toll that drug abuse has taken on our society. PAHO's country profile also indicates a large degree of Bahamian women are grappling with depression and anxiety. Judging by the rate of suicides, men are battling with depression and suicidality as well. Madam Speaker, I look around and I know all of us in this place are old enough to remember the 1980s. It is a time when our still growing nation was seeing the unprecedented increase of drug abuse within and drug use within our population. Born in the 80s. Fortunately, Bahamian mental health pioneers at the time, like Dr. David Allen, were able to link crack use with many of the mental health issues that were manifesting within our population. Many people don't know that the Bahamas played a pivotal role in identifying and spreading awareness of the effects of crack cocaine the use of crack cocaine on physical and mental health of addicts. While we have largely left that era behind, we still live in the shadow of that era, with many lives permanently changed as a result. Many of the people in our community who we refer to as homeless or vagrants or Joneses are suffering from very serious psychiatric disorders. It's so wonderful to see this Mental Health Bill 2022 makes provisions for these people to be taken to the nearest healthcare facility or mental health treatment facility when apprehended, rather than being locked up for loitering. And as the Honorable Member for Exuma and Ragged Island would have noted, the expansion of these facilities, not only here in New Providence, but of course throughout our family islands, is also necessary. Madam Speaker, so many of our issues are interconnected. We look at violent crime, for example. In the aftermath of violent crime, survivors must cope with the physical, mental, and emotional toll. We have so many survivors of violent crime left fractured, unsure of how to move forward in life. We have so many mothers grieving children who were lost to crime. Where you find drug use, crime, poverty, and income inequality, you will also find issues with mental health. These issues are interconnected and often intersect with one another to the point that making a positive impact on one has a positive impact on the other issue. Not only can social and environmental challenges lead to poor mental health can also contribute to the worsening of these issues. You will find that a young man who is economically challenged, emotionally unstable, and lacks the coping skills to navigate these challenges is more likely to turn to crime. It's a cycle. I'm particularly concerned about the state of young people in our nation. In this era of social media, they are constantly in the public eye and feeling pressured to fit in. There's an established correlation between increased social media use and mental health challenges with our young people. The levels of bullying on social media further contribute to this problem. Yet, social media has become a part of our everyday life. We must remember to focus on our young people, never forgetting that as we make resources available, children need just as much mental health support as adults. Madam Speaker, I remain a huge advocate for expanding access to mental health services, especially at a community level. So I'm not content with merely speaking to the issue. Recently, I launched free mental health care and counseling in my constituency, where a professional counselor sees constituents on a regular basis. And I'm happy to have the opportunity to deliver this vital service to Golden Gates and see that they are engaging and utilizing this service. As I moved door to door, I recognized that people were going through a lot. They were struggling with a lot mentally. And I encourage Golden Gates residents who have not already accessed the service and are in need of mental health support to reach out and book an appointment. Madam Speaker, the development of the Mental Health Bill 2022, as many of my colleagues have stated today, has preceded the Davis administration, has preceded the Minnis administration. But as the party of the people, the PLP has an obligation to live up to its name. It's up to us to put forth policies speaking to the well-being of people. We approach the finalization of this bill with great urgency, knowing that literally thousands of Bahamians would be supported in receiving needed mental health support. Now, we have a bill that, once passed, has the potential to change lives. Within this bill, we have an emphasis on the human rights of persons with mental illness. We have anti-discrimination measures. We have the protection of children with mental illness. We have the formation of the Mental Health Services Board to establish and uphold standards. We have the Mental Health Review Tribunal, which will give people with mental illness a chance for their voices to be heard. We have the criminalization of the abuse and neglect of the mentally ill. We have the facilitation of community resources for mental health. And of course, we now have a modern mental health framework upon which we can build and expand to really begin addressing the pressing mental health issues of the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, I think that this is a big deal. And as the Prime Minister would have stated, we will all be either personally impacted by this bill or have a family member or loved one who will be impacted. We all know someone who has challenges within their mental health, and this bill is for them. Our Prime Minister, in his vision, had a holistic approach in the way that he named the Ministry of Mental Health and Wellness, the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And as we debate this week, I hope that through our contributions, we can inspire Bahamians to have honest conversations and an holistic approach about mental health. We're building momentum, and there's a community of people with mental illnesses and mental health professionals who are breathing a sigh of relief right now that this bill has finally made its way to Parliament. Times are changing, and I'm reminded of the young man who ran for Student Government Association president at UB, and his name is Mr. Matthew Williams. His platform was mental health, and it was good enough for him to win. The next generation of leaders already understand the importance of mental health, and we're just catching up to them. We all must come to the common understanding that mental health, good mental health, is good health. It is a time for mental health to be taken seriously, and just as seriously as physical health. We have an amazing opportunity to lead the way and change lives thanks to this bill, and I am proud that we have been able to accomplish this. Madam Speaker, I encourage Golden Gates residents to take advantage of the free counseling, as well as the upcoming mental health clinics. I would also like to invite them to my annual Thanksgiving lunch that will be held next Thursday on Thanksgiving Day. And on the 22nd of November, next Tuesday, the Golden Gates branch will also be hosting a branch meeting where our dynamic member for Elizabeth will be presenting on affordable home ownership and housing initiatives that the government has been so swiftly rolling out. And I invite all Golden Gates residents to be in attendance. As an entrepreneur within the creative community, I will always be an avid supporter of local creatives. And I also try my best to encourage those in my community to experience and enjoy Bahamian creativity. So this Friday, I will be hosting the senior citizens of Golden Gates to view Shakespeare in Paradise and Sam Boodle's The Landlord at the Dundas Center for the Performing Arts with me. Supporting the creative arts is very important to me, and what better way to have a positive, enjoyable experience with the seniors of our community than to support our local artists. Taking time to stop and enjoy life is also a form of wellness. My constituents should check my social media platforms or the constituency broadcast for more details on the aforementioned events. Madam Speaker, real leadership sets the tone. Effective leaders set the pace for others to follow. And visionary leaders leave behind examples and models for others to build on. I believe that this administration, the Davis administration, is on the right track to bring forth major initiatives with legacy potential, in the sense that these initiatives will bring about long lasting changes that will affect the trajectory of our nation. The Mental Health Bill 2022 has the potential to be one of those major accomplishments. And I would like to note, again, this bill has been 10 years in the making. So this is the culmination of Bahamians who have come together fighting to develop a policy, not giving up despite the delays. And today is a victory. And I say that it's powerful, and I'm excited again about this bill. This is an achievement that spans multiple administrations, and I'm simply proud to be standing here in support of positive change for mental health in our community and the Bahamas at large. So, Madam Speaker, I unreservedly stand in support of the Mental Health Bill 2022.
Thank you, Honorable Member Asmini. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central Grand Bahama.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, colleagues, and all those watching from across the length and breadth of the Bahamas and indeed the world. I also want to extend pleasant greetings to the people of Central Grand Bahama, who I so proudly represent in this honorable house. Madam Speaker, before I begin my presentation on this very important matter of the Mental Health Bill 2022, I want to highlight and applaud Central Grand Bahama and Bahamians in general for another fantastic job done over the weekend at the world-famous Central Grand Bahama Farmers Market Festival. The events were once again held on November 12th with resounding success, and we had some 40+ vendors attending this event. Oh, yes, sir. We had Bahamians, residents, and even visitors from across the island eager to purchase the delicious produce. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Products grown in our very own backyard farming. Through this initiative, we are empowering and encouraging every man, woman, and child to get involved. We have seen how far we've gotten in such a short time and can't wait to see where this venture will take us. We will continue to promote Bahamians supporting Bahamians. And in fact, because of popular demand, I'm happy to announce that this weekend, back to back, we are going to be having the Farmers Festival again at the festival site. Madam Speaker, this is all we're asking our government to do, our new government to do. It is to please prioritize the needs of Bahamian. But as I've said in the past, the PLP appears to be more concerned about being popular than being responsible. If they were serious, we will see a more magnified focus on one of our country's most burgeoning problems, food security. Madam Speaker, you said it's going to be nice, but I think across the hall, I've said it before in this honorable house, and I'll say it again. We must find a way to curtail the importation of the food we consume. Tackling this issue is the gateway to so many of our current social ills. But this New Day government, as I said, is more responsible. Thank you very much, West Grand Bahama. Thank you very much. I just want you to know that the official opposition that we are watching and we are here for the Bahamian people. Madam Speaker, on this very important mental health bill, I will speak initially from the onset that I'm in support. But I want to speak directly to my resilient people in Grand Bahama, my dear Grand Bahamians. We have just gone through another very nerve-wracking experience with the passage of Tropical Storm Nicole, or Hurricane Nicole. It was a reminder that we are not out of the woods yet. And, truth be told, as it appears, Grand Bahama and Abaco appears to be a magnet or to be a bullseye for these hurricanes in Hurricane Alley. The Atlantic Basin hurricane season ends this month, thanks be to God, so we must still remain vigilant. And even after, we must continue to remain on guard because with the worsening of climate change, Mother Nature can and will be merciless. We mess with Mother Nature, she comes back with a vengeance. As it is stated in Hosea 8:7, for they sow to the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind. The large industrial countries have sown to the wind, and small island developing states like the Bahamas are reaping the whirlwind. An injustice that needs to be corrected. Yeah, he's been learning from me. Madam Speaker, we are thankful that we were spared from any injury or major damage with the passage of Nicole. We know that these storms are not only getting stronger, and for some reason, they seem to, like I said earlier, consistently visit our country. Yes, Grand Bahama is open for business, but anything that could disrupt the continued recovery, especially those storms, they are not welcome. We pray for God's guidance and protection through the rest of the season and, of course, the rest of the year. Madam Speaker, colleagues, Dorian was 3 years ago, and yet the journey to recovery and restoration continues for residents in the hardest hit areas. This effort has not only been the physical rebuilding of properties, but the emotional and mental work of trauma recovery. Many Grand Bahamians and Abaconians have spoken to me and shared how whenever it rains or there are storms approaching, they have flashbacks of Dorian's monstrous surge, forceful wind, and all that was washed away in the storm. Then less than 6 months after the storm, the Bahamas was hit with another storm that lasted for more than 2 years. This trauma caused by Dorian, the worsening of stress and loss caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and an eventual lack of access to mental health support have caused significant mental health gaps in our country. The Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO, warned, as was stated earlier, in 2020, that the coronavirus pandemic caused a mental health crisis in the region of the Americas. And I believe we have only just started to see the result of this, and we must brace and prepare for what is to come. The Inter-American Development Bank, or IDB, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, assessed the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Bahamas and described that the country's challenges with mental health are indeed complex. We know that mental health concerns of anxiety, confusion, depression, and post-traumatic stress are just some of the challenges being faced. The compounded trauma from these twin tragedies not only significantly impact our country's economy and way of life, but our human capital, our most valuable resources. Our essential workers stood on the front line daily through overcrowding, burnout, and loss at home and on the job. We cannot thank them enough for their sacrifice and service. Building back better should start with our people. We cannot deny that the compounded trauma has certainly made managing these events the more difficult for everyday Bahamians. And as a society, we are not adequately taught how to deal with grief. More must be done. This particular issue is very near and dear to my heart because I know, Madam Speaker, firsthand how trauma can immobilize someone after losing loved ones so close. And I'll share a personal story. When my son passed, when I got the news, it was at 11 o'clock. And I don't remember what happened, but I said I have to make reservations to go see my daughter, find out what's going on in Alabama. When I look at my watch, it was 5:30. I couldn't remember what happened between 11 and 5:30. Totally lost. And I'll tell you, up to 3 years, I would see the Bahamians, we are proud people. We don't like to tell our story. I would look at you, I know your face, I couldn't remember your name. And I was too ashamed to say, well, I don't remember. So I'll talk and get clues from you until I say, oh, now I know who that person is. So it took me a while. I was in a deep hole. I'm too proud to tell my family, too proud to tell my friends. I almost tipped. Thank God, because of my upbringing and my faith, I was able to pull myself and let David encourage himself. Real talk, I experienced it. So I know what it is to tip and go over the edge and not come back. But we as Bahamians, we need to be able to vent. And let's be sensitive. When someone comes to you with their story, do not go and spread it. If you don't mean them well, don't say anything. Because it is a reality in this country. And I'm not ashamed to say I was there. I was there. Almost didn't come back. And I thank God, my memory is about 90% now. I can understand and remember much better, much clearer, but I'm not nowhere near where I used to be. But I can see success. So again, it's reality. I am a testimony. This is an issue that we must address at every level. Madam Speaker, this is where this very important mental health bill 2022 will come into play. The bill will seek to make provisions for the protection and enforcement of rights of persons diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness, and for the best establishment of a mental health services board and a mental health review tribunal. The bill sets out the general principles for administration of mental health services in the Bahamas and provides for the implementation and promotion of programs for the care and treatment of persons with mental illness and for the mental well-being of the people of the Bahamas. I believe this legislation that we did, some of the framework for, will become a game changer. We all take credit for it, yes. And we are going to be in full support. Madam Speaker, our people are indeed crying for help. Our people are crying for help. Madam Speaker, can be nice. But with legislation, we must implement, and with legislation must come implementation and enforcement. We must ensure that Bahamians are given the right support system to access this level of care. We must ensure that the right people are in the right place to advance this matter. And the member from Exuma and Reagan Island talk about access to facilities, and so did Golden Gates. And Golden Gates, like you are doing, I have already initiated. I've initiated counseling session also in my constituencies. I am, what I was about to say, access to facilities. Madam Speaker, there was a person who we refer to as a drug addict. And this is important. Person that we refer to as a drug addict, who called me, they was ready to change their life. They needed help. At my expense, I went and picked the person up, brought them to Nassau, and took them to Sandlin's Rehab Center. When I got there, when I got to Sandlin's Rehab Center, the administrator, the person receiving me said, well, are you paying now or paying later? And I was like, paying for what? He said, well, in order to check this program is $1,000. And I was like, well, fortunately, I had some money on me. I paid out of my pocket for the person to get their treatment. I said, what happens if someone shows up? They don't have the funds. What do we do? Real talk. So this is a matter that we must fix. I experienced it again. I'm testifying today. I had to pay $1,000 to get this person some treatment. So there are persons that are begging for help who will go, but they don't have the wherewithal to receive the services. We must fix that. We've heard the member for Tall Pines, in his absence, said time and time, when he travels through the streets of New Providence, there are evidence of mental decay. You see panhandlers and those that we label as Joneses, stereotype, roaming aimlessly. Even downtown is filled with homeless people sleeping and loitering in areas along the sidewalk. More must be done. And while I'm on the topic, Madam Speaker, I want to publicly condemn the exploitation, like Golden Gates did, of this vulnerable population. And Marco City also referred to it. There seems to be this trend on social media of our people taunting and taking advantage of people with mental illness on social media. I've seen videos of people coercing or antagonizing these people, all for a laugh or for hits on social media. God will deal with them. Madam Speaker, this is wrong and this has to stop. We must get serious in this country Although it is difficult to define, there's no litmus test to really measure mental illness. But it is real. And our complex mental health issues do not stop at our streets. Madam Speaker, we cannot forget Grand Bahama and our family islands, where there's currently, and I stress the fact, little to no access to free mental health care. There's something, I think at the Random Memorial Hospital, they call it the Dire Wards. I'm not sure if there's any treatment there. They commit them to the Dire Ward. And I don't know what kind of counseling is offered there, but I think they just commit them there. Dire Ward is not good enough. We need facilities where counseling, where treatment can be taken. You're right, absolutely right. The Sandlands Rehab Center has held the line in this fight and continues to carry the burden of our country's mental health issues. So much so that oftentimes we see victims of this being caught up in our judicial system, where Sandlands is at capacity. Mental ill prisoners are placed in jail with no real support system to address their needs and concerns. Most recently, as was referred to earlier, there was an incident of death in the prison with a mentally ill inmate, the cause of which remains under investigation. I think it was 2. Yes, thank you very much, Freedown. I'm not sure that our prison officers are trained to deal with mentally ill patients, and neither are our law enforcement officers. So therefore, more needs to be done. Madam Speaker, I believe the rights that this bill will provide will aid in addressing some real issues in the country, ultimately bettering the lives of all. It gives people with mental illness a voice and much needed representation, from a right to care and treatment to a right to not be discriminated against when accessing care. A lot of good can be done with this bill, but I stress the fact that it must be done right. Building back better should start with our people. Madam Speaker, we know that the government provides some support, but this is indeed not enough. What social services support is being implemented to help the most vulnerable in the community? We need mental health support in the schools and in the workplace, especially with the heightened rate of burnout across the globe. Madam Speaker, the Bahamian people want to see action. But this new government, in some instances again, less focused on being popular than being responsible. The New Day government is look, this is a part of the presentation. Yes, the New Day government is gallivanting across the globe on the Bahamian purse. Oh yeah, got to get you going. In just 3 months, and I'm going to continue to do good, continue to chair. This government spent $4.2 million on travel and subsistence. You see, that's it. As Bachobi, you can take the compliment, but we need criticism too. The good comes with the bad. It's nearly a 2.3 million increase when compared to the same period last year. Don't continue to tell. Where is your care for the Bahamian people? Where's accountability? I know all of the apples that I've stressed this over and over. All of the apples are not bad. All of the apples are not bad. But there's something called collective responsibility.
No, don't say that. It wasn't that.
There's something called collective responsibility. I trust that outside, and I'll say this one more time. I trust that outside, oh yes, the good will suffer with the bad. I trust that outside of party line activities, and I said it last time, I'm going to say it again. When you go into your quiet spaces, you'll be convicted by your conscience, convinced in your heart, and moved by your spirit to do the things that will really move the needle in favor of the Bahamian people. Like removing VAT from bread basket items, putting 12% VAT back on property exceeding $1.5 million on persons who are recession-proof, extending the search order until not only Grand Bahama and Abaco recovers, but the entire country. The people deserve a new day of hope and no more new days of despair. At the end of the day, the New Day government will prove trying to be popular, both unpopular and irresponsible if you don't make these signs. I'm helping you. No worries, my brothers and sisters across the land and bed of the Bahamas. The official opposition will hold the government's feet to the fire in the best interest of the Bahamian people. Governments are continuous and we want them to succeed. So we simply urge the New Day government to stay focused. As always, the official opposition is here to provide bipartisan support for this New Day government. I am continually honored and grateful for this responsibility to be a representative for the people, the good people of Central Grand Bahama, and will continue to do my best to ensure that their voices are heard. Central Grand Bahama stands in support of this bill.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Pine Ridge.
Madam Speaker and colleagues of this honorable House, good afternoon. It is with joy and gratitude that I rise today in support of this life-changing piece of legislation for many. Life-changing, Madam Speaker, because this Mental Health Bill 2022 will have a significant impact on the lives of thousands of Bahamians who have suffered in silence or whose cries have been unheard for years. Madam Speaker, I also rise to represent the wonderful people of Pine Ridge, a community of strong, resilient residents who have literally weathered the physical, emotional, and mental effects of many storms, plus life's challenges, and they have survived. From the storm surge threat of Category 1 Hurricane Nicole that recently traveled across the length and breadth of Grand Bahama Island, to the hours of heavy rain dumped by the potential tropical cyclone back in June of this year, to the monstrous Category 5 Hurricane Dorian that left the island devastated in 2019, and every storm before it. These circumstances not only destroy physical structures, Madam Speaker, they can also disrupt a person's mental health. For the residents of Pine Ridge and the people of Grand Bahama, the Mental Health Bill 2022 will assist and protect Grand Bahamians and Abaconians in particular, who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorders from hurricanes and COVID-19, mental health issues, and families who are dealing with loved ones with mental illness. Madam Speaker, in this Davis Cooper administration's 10-point plan of our Blueprint for Change, at point number 8, page 45, we pledge to address the mental health issues in the country as a priority. That's mine, sorry. Stop. That was 4 a.m. this morning, not p.m. Mental health care for far too long has been treated as a subcategory, playing a backseat role to one's overall health and not given the adequate and necessary attention to promote a person's holistic well-being. However, on this day, Madam Speaker, this administration puts forth another people-centered bill, a bill that places mental health care at a level equivalent to that of physical health care services. What this means for persons on Grand Bahama Island and throughout the Bahamas is help is on the way. To the persons who are exhibiting symptoms of PTSD, who have had a stressful experience brought on by a natural disaster or the unexpected loss of a loved one that caused fear, anxiety, anger, and a sense of hopelessness, help is on the way. To the family members of persons with mental issues who are homeless, living in dilapidated buildings, unable to communicate with their loved ones because the person they once knew has become unrecognizable, help is on the way. Madam Speaker, today I commend the member for Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador, our Prime Minister, and the member for Tall Pines, the Honorable Dr. Michael Davel, for bringing forth this legislation that is so necessary for protecting the rights of people with mental disorders, a vulnerable section of our society. Madam Speaker, the combined impact of a climate crisis, the pandemic, and other factors have increased the demand for mental health support, wellness, and sensitivity training. This, I believe, played a key role in our people-focused administration's renaming of the Ministry of Health to the Ministry of Health and Wellness, as said by the member of Golden Gates. And Madam Speaker, this people-focused administration is delivering on one of its priorities through this legislation that clearly illustrates that our government cares about improving mental health conditions and thus improving the nation. With this important piece of legislation, we will also run an educational awareness campaign for mental wellness and mental health. We will launch a focused communications exercise around this Mental Health Care Act 2022 to attract attention to the bill on a national scale. We will also provide training on all aspects of mental health legislation throughout the Bahamas to develop and disseminate best practices. Madam Speaker, allowing mental health stigma to stand in the way of basic human rights is unacceptable. Through this legislation and dedicated advocacy, change is being enacted. Indeed, knowledge is power. People living with mental illness should be empowered with information, advice, and the support of individuals, groups, and decision makers. As a result, they can gain control of their lives and demand the respect and dignity to which they deserve. And this legislation seeks to do just that. Madam Speaker, the fact of the matter is we all need to take mental health seriously. This is a global issue where we need to be proactive instead of reactive. Quite frankly, Madam Speaker, as the member for Pine Ridge, whose constituency includes the downtown area, we see mental health issues up close and personal almost every day. And for that reason, and as a part of my 10-point agenda for Pine Ridge, point number 6, health and wellness, focuses on mental health with our mental health series. These sessions begin early in the new year. And Madam Speaker, the reality is that Grand Bahama has been faced with intense challenges and setbacks, one after the other, compounded by another and another. With the passage of hurricanes, coupled with the onslaught of lockdowns and deaths due to COVID-19, we have seen the symptoms of what we have endured manifested in upticks in domestic abuse, suicidal thoughts, and mental illness. We are still in recovery mode, and although Grand Bahama is physically rebuilding, it is about time that we focus on mentally rebuilding. Madam Speaker, the new mandate given by the member of Cat Island, Rum Key, and San Salvador to the Ministry for Grand Bahama caused the creation of the CoLab unit to partner with NGOs, businesses, other government agencies, and the community at large to assist with the basic needs of residents. We believe that addressing the mental health crisis on Grand Bahama Island is a basic need, a basic right. And therefore, it is front and center as a focus of my ministry. So, to the member for Central Grand Bahama, this might be along the path of what you have just suggested. Within the next few weeks, Madam Speaker, CoLab will launch its resource center in Trip Circle that will provide on-site wellness counselors, as well as programs specific to the promotion of mental well-being and to restoring dignity to the lives of those who are going through it. The CoLab Resource Center also offers a relaxed space for servicing residents for local and international partner NGOs that focus on wellness as their primary objective. CoLab has also partnered with the Disaster Reconstruction Authority to develop and restore the former missile-based library in East Grand Bahama with a focus on mental health services, wellness, and empowerment. This site is adjacent to the Dorian Memorial in Gold Rock Creek at the entrance to East Grand Bahama, which was constructed by our beautiful Grand Bahama East team. The Ministry for Grand Bahama is in the business of collaborating to transform lives, and through CoLab, Partnerships for Development, we are partnering with the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development on initiatives that directly relate to mental health awareness. We are all in this together. Madam Speaker, with the passing of the Mental Health Bill 2022, we continue to provide compassionate social relief as promised in our Blueprint for Change. With our objective for the basics of life with dignity, we aim to destigmatize mental illness and address the cries of our people for the necessary focus on mental health care. We aim also to ensure that Bahamians can hold their heads up high with dignity in spite of the challenges experienced. Madam Speaker, we stand today at the precipice of a new era in mental health, and as a compassionate government, we have brought forth this historic legislation. We owe it to ourselves, our loved ones, our friends and colleagues, our communities, our nation to eradicate the stigma associated with mental illness and fully recognize the vital role of mental health in all of our lives. This administration is committed to supporting people living with a mental illness or mental disorder. Madam Speaker, in the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization warned that a substantial investment in mental health services was necessary to avert a mental health crisis. I believe that this people-focused administration is on the right track. We recognize that mental health, human rights, and legislation are closely linked. And this Davis-Cooper administration committed to delivering changes that help to improve mental health services and support, strengthen rights, and address the underlying causes of mental health problems. Madam Speaker, it is this people-focused administration's overall objective to recover, rebuild, and revolutionize our country with a compassionate social agenda. And providing high-quality mental health care and treatment is critical for the progression of any nation. To the people of Pine Ridge, the people of Grand Bahama, and the people throughout the length and breadth of the Bahamas, this Davis-Cooper administration will continue to initiate programs and legislation to rescue the most vulnerable and discouraged in our society to rebuild their lives with dignity. We are with you. Madam Speaker, Pine Ridge wholeheartedly supports this Mental Health Bill 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member Asmini. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central and South Abaco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am humbly honored to rise again on behalf of Central and South Abaco on this highly important issue that has in recent years affected many in my constituency, mental health. Madam Speaker, before I get into my contribution to this Mental Health Bill 2022, I would like to address my fellow Abaconians. We lost a great Abaconian recently, Jonathan Robert McKinney from Sandy Point, affectionately known as the General. My most sincere and deepest condolences to his family, and may he rest in peace. Roadworks are a hot topic in Abaco right now and are greatly needed in all of the communities of Central and South Abaco constituency. So we have 50 tons of asphalt material that has been purchased from a local hot mix plant, and 2 crews are being formed to tackle the highways and streets. I have dedicated myself to provide Abaco Public Works with whatever the necessary workers are needed. I am pleased to inform you that these works will commence next week, weather permitting. Great Guanakee Roads works have started and are well on their way. This is a partnership with Bakers Bay and this David Cooper administration. Pelican Shores Roads works have been scoped and are being prepared for contract. This will commence by year's end should no issues arise. Many other roads are in despair and they'll be attended to. Madam Speaker, Tropical Storm Nicole, which formed into a hurricane, made landfall in central Abaco and caused widespread flooding in all the coastal and low-lying areas. We were blessed to have little wind damage and no serious injury. However, Nicole was most unwelcomed and was a speed bump in Abaco's rebound and recovery from Dorian. I am optimistic and see proof of support from the current government. Proof shown by a delegation from central government led by Deputy Prime Minister I. Chester Cooper, who was the acting Prime Minister at the time. This delegation for assessment to Abaco included many cabinet members and technical teams. This team included Minister Sears from Public Works, Mr. Rowe from National Security, Minister LaRota, NEMA and DRA, Minister Bell from Labor and Immigration, Minister Darville from Health, Minister Wilchcombe from Social Services, Chairman Storr from DRA, and other technical personnel. The ministers assessed, thank you, and Paulsec Baucus Roll from Public Works. The ministers assessed their respective departments so assistance could be provided without delay. Thank you to all those who traveled to Abaco and took part in our post-storm assessment. Thank you to all those who managed and helped at the shelters, the BPL crew on the ground, water and sewage crew on the ground, police force, defense force, administrator role, all working together, and many more that were involved in preparing for and rectifying the after effects of Nicole. Madam Speaker, if Abaco was given the same support after Superstorm Hurricane Dorian, Abaco probably would be fully recovered, and Abaconians wouldn't have to endure the hardship that they did. My fellow Abaconians, we still have many challenges. I ask for your patience, as I have been and will continue to work tirelessly on all accounts. I hear and understand the concerns and issues. Many projects have steps and procedures that must take place in the background before they can get started. My promise to you has not been forgotten and will be fulfilled. I will continue to speak loud without restraint on your behalf. Continue to persevere, be resilient, and I know this Davis Cooper administration has Abaco at its heart. My fellow Abaconians, better days are ahead and a bright future for our youth, our greatest resource. I will not waver, I will not stop. Standing together, we will have a better quality life and a prosperous future. Madam Speaker, this Mental Health Bill 2022 is an immense step forward in our national health initiative. For Bahamians throughout the Bahamas to finally have access to proper mental health assistance is monumental, and I applaud the Ministry of Health and the Honorable Member for Tall Pines and his initiatives, his time and his energy in revamping our healthcare throughout the Bahamas, and in particular the Family Islands. This mental health bill further highlights the very important aspect of removing the cultural stigma against mental health that we currently have. No Bahamian that has been diagnosed or exhibits symptoms of mental health issues in our country should be removed from their rights, dignity, or to have assistance. They will lead a full and rewarding life as Bahamians with the right support. Madam Speaker, after Hurricane Dorian, many Bahamians, particularly in Abaco and Grand Bahama, have become fully aware of mental health challenges, some from the storm itself, and many more from the trauma in its aftermath. Many experienced great trauma, which caused PTSD and other mental issues. With the recent passing of Tropical Storm Nicole, anxiety was high, and people revisited their feelings from that trauma. Despite it being a much smaller storm, and over 3 years ago, children shiver or hide when they hear thunder or strong winds. Grown adults nervous. Anxiety was high, and some opted to leave. These are all signs of PTSD caused from that trauma. Sometimes even a certain smell or sound can be a trigger. Many found having a professional to talk to post-Dorian significantly helped their mental well-being. Some NGOs offered assistance, but professional help wasn't broadly available to everyone in need. Many Bahamians have long-lasting mental health challenges. My fellow Bahamians, no matter what island they reside on, should have access to mental health care if they so wish or need it, especially after a traumatic event such as Dorian or other life traumas like the 2 years of lockdown from COVID. Tragically, some Bahamians did not have access to these important services, and the life post-Dorian was too much for them to bear. Life has been a constant struggle for many, and this, along with the mental and physical trauma, becomes too heavy for them to bear alone. Unfortunately, due to lack of access and cultural stigmas, many were unable or refused to seek help. We sadly have lost some great Bahamians to mental health illnesses, and those closest to them are unaware until it is too late. This mental health bill says to my fellow Bahamians, you are not alone. You do not have to fight this alone. There is help for you. You will not be discriminated against, and it will promote dignity, respect, privacy, and recovery. Madam Speaker, What I find particularly beneficial about this bill is that it will be available to every Bahamian throughout the Bahamas, integrated into the general care, healthcare services at all levels. Being accessible throughout the archipelago of the Bahamas is essential. Furthermore, persons seeking mental health services will be transported to where services are provided at the cost of the ministry, which eliminates the barrier of having the necessary funds to access these possible life-saving services. The bill highlights recovery, accessibility, and prevention of suicide, but also improved quality of life with treatment. Madam Speaker, mental trauma has a wide range of triggers. We aren't only dealing with storm and aftermath trauma. It can also arise from abuse, parental or spousal, and many other triggers that are effective in our normal and everyday life. And it affects every Bahamian of any age. Our citizens, from our most vulnerable youth to our dearest elderly, deserve access to these services throughout our country. This bill seeks to protect the human rights of every person diagnosed or exhibiting symptoms. Those victims of abuse will now have access to professional medical assistance to help them cope and seek the help they will need to continue a healthy life in mind and body. Madam Speaker, what is mental health? The US CDC says mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. It is also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy and strong choices. Mental health issues and mental illness are medical illnesses. And with this bill, they will finally be treated as such, either caused by genetics, hereditary, from trauma, from abuse. Mental health challenges should be treated like any other medical illness and be diagnosed and treated by trained health professionals. With proper access to treatment, patients can continue to lead fulfilling and productive lives. Madam Speaker, even in the Nassau Guardian front page, more than 80 mentally ill inmates at prison. So was revealed that the Bahamas Department of Correctionals is now housing 80 mentally ill inmates. Madam Speaker, some of these, given the proper assistance, may not be in that position, may have had the help that they needed, and may be productive Bahamians in our society. This bill, this mental health bill, aims to help our citizens before their mental health decline leads to life-deteriorating decisions or even a life of crime. This bill will provide an avenue towards treatment and getting them the help they need to make healthy choices and live fulfilling lives. As the USA CDC stated, poor mental health affects how a person feels, but also how they act. It also affects making healthy life choices. It is common to see mentally ill inmates incarcerated throughout the world, but with this bill, we hope to provide the access to treatment and prevent the mental health decline before it leads to irreversible, life-changing actions and consequences. Madam Speaker, another important legal aspect present in this bill is when a person is evaluated and is deemed incapable or lacks the mental capacity, a conservator can be assigned to assist that person in regards to a person's property and financial and personal affairs. Participation and voluntary treatment is a priority in this bill. But when a case is presented where a loved one lacks the mental capacity to oversee their affairs, that a person can be assigned to assist in those legal matters. This legal hurdle will assist many families to ensure their loved ones who lack the mental capacity are taken care of and can assist with their legal matters pertaining to their personal affairs. Madam Speaker, we all know firsthand that education is key. Educating not only our youth, but our entire nation on removing this stigma and removing discrimination about mental health is equally important. Many won't seek help if they fear discrimination or fear to appear weak or broken. We must reach out to our brothers and sisters and let them know it is okay to seek help. We must be our brother's keeper. This bill promotes mental health wellness and education to mental health professionals and the community, which will assist those in need to step forward and receive the treatment they need to recover or to maintain a healthy life. No one should suffer alone. No one should refuse treatments due to fear or discrimination or lack of funds. This administration is seeing that this basic human right is not dismissed, and mental health is made a priority in this country, in our Bahama land. Madam Speaker, I am proud to stand here today and declare that Central and South Abaco supports this bill fully. Again, I applaud the Ministry of Health and Wellness for this and this Davis administration for taking this initiative and bringing forth awareness. I have seen firsthand the mental anguish of our children and our youth and our adults in and after Hurricane Dorian, throughout COVID, when many lost their livelihoods, and many other aspects. It is important for every Bahamian to know that it is not a weakness and you are not broken, but to seek help will help you fulfill a long and prosperous life. So, without going into anything else and asking where some things were and so on and so forth, I'm going to stick with Madam Speaker, and I'd like to say Central and South Abaco full-heartedly supports this bill. God bless my fellow Bahamians, and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for St. Anne's.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I arrived in the House today, left my home, and arrived in the House today with a motivation in me. An intention, Madam Speaker, like the majority of the members of the public, have had enough with this current administration. I knew that when I came here, I was going to insist that they give me the keys, Madam Speaker, because the people don't want them in government anymore. I came here to insist that they give me the keys, Madam Speaker. However, out of respect for our guests today and the preferences that Madam Speaker has set down for how we participate in today's debate, I'm not going to go further with my intentions, and I'll claim the keys another day.
Which keys, Honorable Member?
Keys to government, Madam Speaker. From top to bottom, Madam Speaker. South Andros too, my brother. I'll still take care of you in St. Anne's, though. Now, Madam Speaker, I felt justified in insisting that they should bring me the keys, bring the opposition side the keys to government, because this administration, Madam Speaker, is never where it needs to be when it should be there. And it's continuing to be evident, Madam Speaker, when we look at the bill we're actually debating today, which is the mental health bill under the ministry of the minister who is not here, Madam Speaker. When he should be here, he is not here, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member
For the edification of the member for St. Anne's, the minister is out of country on a pre-arranged event that he's attending representing the government of the Bahamas. He will be here next Wednesday when the debate continues, and he will speak to the debate, and he will deal with matters that are raised that require any kind of answers. So the member is away, but we have an acting minister, and we're all fully aware of the bill, and so we represent.
Thank you, honourable member. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We're here debating the mental health bill, Madam Speaker, and the Minister of Health is not here. Madam Speaker, we recently had COP27, and we did not have our Minister of Environment or a Minister for State Environment there. They are not where they need to be when they should be there. Madam Speaker, we also had tropical storm, and clearly to the news of some of the members on the opposite side, Hurricane Nicole moved through our Bahamas, and our leader, the nation's prime minister, Madam Speaker, was not here. He was not where he needed to be when he should have been there. And now, Madam Speaker, I can't say the letters.
They can't help themselves.
Maybe I'll call it XTF, not to get in trouble. But, Madam Speaker, we now have an issue with XTF, and the Attorney General, Madam Speaker, who is a financial services KC, is not here when we need him to be here, Madam Speaker. That is why, Madam Speaker, that is why I ask that they bring me the keys.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for West Grand Bahama and Domain.
While I appreciate the member is relatively new, he's been in here long enough to know that governments continue. And the office is always fully held, and every ministry is represented. When a minister is out of country, a minister sits in, another serves. So governments continue, all times. And trust me, our government is well represented.
Madam Speaker, I know that when the day comes and they bring me the keys, my mentor, the member for West Grand Bahama, will be there with me smiling. Yes. Madam Speaker, we have heard that their government is continuous and there is someone in place of the Attorney General, but it's not been announced in the papers who is the acting Attorney General. Yes, we have heard who is the acting Minister of Health, but at this time, the Bahamian people want to know who is the acting Attorney General. Yes. That has not been disclosed in the paper, Madam Speaker, and truthfully, I have no idea why our Attorney General needs to be in Egypt at this time. But he is a man, and the government, while I don't approve of it, the government has the plan. Now, Madam Speaker, this XTF issue, you'll recall, Madam Speaker, because I know you pay great detail to what I say in this House when you permit me. On May 16th, we were debating legislation before the House to deal with the carbon credit trading. And I said at that time, Madam Speaker, you shake a man's hand and he can shake your future. April 26th to April 29th, a few good men, I'll leave it there, were on that SALT Bitcoin conference, and they were shaking the hands of the men whose ships have now sunk. I was not. I was not. But, Madam Speaker, we sit back today. This is a very serious issue for the jurisdiction. And I know that I, along with my fellow members of the opposition, will act in all manners to do what is best with our members from the government side to ensure that our jurisdiction remains protected and that as one, we continue to promote it. Madam Speaker, I listened to my good friend, the member from Exuma and Ragged Island. We have become travel buddies recently. We've both been to Abaco and Grand Bahama at the same time.
You had a piece of that travel.
Yeah.
You had a piece of that travel. You had a piece of that travel.
I did ask him if there was a space on his plane. He said, no, we are full. But Madam Speaker, he brought up, when he was speaking about the mental health bill, he did a very good job with his contribution. Whenever I listen to the Prime Minister or to the Deputy Prime Minister, something always gets said by one of them that's an overreach or an irritation. It gets under my skin. And Madam Speaker, the member for Exuma and Ragged Island today, in attempting to describe the reasons and the objectives that this administration is bringing the mental health bill forward, is that they aspire to be a nation of compassion. And Madam Speaker, when I heard that, my mind just went to those persons with the bus contracts in North Abaco and our family islands who, with 2 years left under their contracts, have had them canceled. Their investments in the vehicles necessary to move the children of tomorrow has been taken away from them, Madam Speaker. But as you asked me to before, I will not go further. Boy, if the microphones were live in this house right now, I will not say what I've just heard behind me. Do it? No, I won't do that, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, I very much welcome this mental health bill, which we have before us today. Now, as the Member of Parliament for the great constituency of St. Anne's, for the Member of Parliament for the great constituency of St. Anne's, I have honestly been fingers deep in mental health issues in our country. And that is since I've become the Member of Parliament, Madam Speaker. We have beautiful coastal lines, we have public spaces, and at different times, they become camps for an individual or more than one individual. And it's caused me, Madam Speaker, to continuously assess with a hawk's eye every time I pass whether there's been some development, either somebody new who has moved in, somebody old who still hasn't moved out. And that hawk eye of mine has caused me, and I raise it now early before I get into the act too much, but it has caused me and a number of my constituents, and even Freetown constituents, to notice that on the way home, passing that East Bay traffic light that intersects with Village Road and Shirley Street, there is now a new structure right next to the water and sewage cement building on Montague, on Fort Montague, on the foreshore there. So as you pass the commercial buildings, it's almost directly opposite Island Lux's new corporate center that's under construction. It has a tongue and groove wall facing Bay Street, double sinks. It has a closed-in structure like a conch shack might have, and it has a deck next to it. In total, it must cover a space of 60 feet by roughly 20 feet. And the residents of St. Anne's, the residents of Freetown, to my knowledge, have no idea who gave them permission to do it. And we, like every person in this country, does not appreciate and will never want to tolerate an act first, ask later approach. That is operating with the cart before the horse, no plan in mind. I have raised it because I needed to for my people, and in case there was someone in the House today that knew who had given permission to the persons that have constructed those three structures, which together form as one, and whether it's something that has approval, and if not, when will it be demolished and removed? Madam Speaker, that hawk-eye of mine caught that object because it's trained to catch developments on Montague foreshore and along waterfront and other locations. I've had individuals in my neighborhood, and many of my constituents have had them in their neighborhoods. There was a gentleman about 1 month into this new government, October 2021, who set up a camp at Montague, and he occupied the area. Clearly, he had no intention of leaving for the day to go to work or to do anything productive. There was an odor that came from there. Eventually, with enough persistence with the representatives from the Fox Hill Police Station, he moved on, Madam Speaker. And I think he actually occupied an old Jeep that is still at the beginning of Shirley Street, right after the Village Road traffic light on the right-hand side. Even though Prince William and his Kate Middleton came to town, there was improvements to the tar, to the pavement, but that derelict van, Jeep, remained there. Madam Speaker, since that individual moved on, there must have been a disturbance in one of the neighboring roads off of Village Road into the St. Anne side, because all of a sudden there was more homeless individuals that clearly had mental issues, again occupying Montague foreshore. That's between the St. Anne's Fish Ramp and Dix Point. There was 2 camps that remained there for a month, close to 2 months. And again, with the assistance of the members from the Royal Bahamas Police Force Fox Hill Station, one of the individuals moved on. And before he did, he left a pile of his collected items and waste. And being an MP, I know what I will do if necessary. I know what I will do if necessary, Madam Speaker, but there are departments, there are organizations, there are government bodies that have the responsibility that should be collecting the waste that had neatly been piled up, never collected, and then got discarded and brushed around. I went down there one Saturday morning, Madam Speaker, and I began to tidy it up, put it all in the waste bin, put it in the back of my MP 4-door Hilux 4-wheel drive truck. Diesel, Madam Speaker, it's diesel. And Madam Speaker, all manner of things was in this pile that I cleaned up, Madam Speaker. What we have here, Madam Speaker, is another case where further down along Eastern Road, opposite Silk Road, just before Adams Street, the individual who was here, his identity has been protected. It's only showing from knees down. But this is an individual that stayed in that location for 7 days. And despite multiple requests and calls from residents, he would be there at some points, and then he would apparently not be there at times when the police would check. But this was an individual that was not only collecting from everyone's garbage up and down Eastern Road, not only collecting from everyone's garbage up and down Eastern Road, but when he was approached by a resident, this is a section of St. Anne's where a number of residents walk regularly. They walk very early in the morning before the sun is up, and they walk in the evening time. And when one approached to see if the gentleman needed anything, he threw a conch at the resident, and if he wasn't physically capable, he might have been hit by it. He was able to dodge it. But these are instances, Madam Speaker, where there are persons with real mental illness. It's not just a case of individuals that have made a decision to sort of live a nomadic, homeless life, Madam Speaker. But the problem is, Madam Speaker, and it's not covered entirely by this bill. There's something in this bill which I'm going to touch on, start with when I get into the bill. The bill doesn't address, Madam Speaker, the biggest problem, and that is the resources. That is when a constituent makes a call or a resident makes a call about a person with mental illness, either being on their property or being on public property. There aren't the resources for the police to do a simple step, which is go down there, collect the individual, and move the individual into an accommodation where they can receive proper treatment. The Act provides now for those things to happen, but as we've heard, the Guardian reported today, there are 80 persons in Her Majesty's prison that have mental conditions. And, Madam Speaker, putting these individuals in prison isn't the solution, but it's likely so severe that that's been deemed to be the only solution, the only way to address it. In addition to having an individual like this where there's clear mental issues, the police would like to get involved. There has historically been uncertainty by the police, whether they can intervene or whether they can only intervene after a constituent has made a complaint. Madam Speaker, the Act speaks to that in part. I would ask that it be amended to go further, but when I get into it, I will. And Madam Speaker, the other issue that the police have is, yes, if they get a complaint, say they take them into custody for vagrancy, the issue is, well, we'll get them before the court, and then they're out the next day. And some of these individuals have a bit of a homing device in them, because once they're out, they end up back to where they must have determined was their new location that they wanted to be, and they show up again and again. So it's been very difficult for the members of the Royal Bahamas Police Force to handle it. I have heard one of my colleagues, one of the 39, possibly one of the Magnificent Seven, but definitely one of the 39, say that there needs to be more training, or there should be training, because they recognize that the police and the members of the correctional facilities at Her Majesty's prison don't necessarily have the training to deal with persons with mental issues. So, Madam Speaker, those are things that we need to do, but very importantly, before I dive into the Act, Madam Speaker, there needs to be money out of the budget. Now, this is all big talk. There are some benefits that can have application, but this is all big talk if there aren't more facilities. And to simply say, we recognize the problem, no matter which side does it, but we don't have the money to create the housing, we need it to be a public-private partnership. That's a solution if you have somebody already in line to do the private-public partnership. Without that person in line to do the private-public partnership, or the NGO to donate the money that you're going to need to start with by housing 80 persons from Her Majesty's prison who are likely improperly housed there because it's not seen to be a health facility. And you have, in St. Anne's, I would say you have 5 individuals. I'm sure in other constituencies, there are going to be individuals that representatives in this House can think of right now and say, this is a person that has mental issues. They've been living in the lifestyle that they have because there hasn't really been anything better that can be offered to them. And honestly, so long as they're not harming someone, it's not something that I can get involved with. So, Madam Speaker, the country needs out of its budget, the money was reported to be rolling in this morning. The country needs out of its budget to make further accommodation, Madam Speaker, for persons that need mental health care. And it's persons that need mental health care at Sandilands. It's persons that need mental health care in other family islands. It's persons that under this Act, which I'll touch on, can have an accommodation that's suitably structured so the Minister of Health and the Minister of National Security can decide and give credit to become a healthcare facility, Madam Speaker. But we need to move with haste in identifying those facilities. And if it is something that at least can take 10, 20 people off from the streets and get them the treatment. Maybe they get released after 3 weeks or after 3 months, but get them off from the accommodations and the lifestyles that they're being subjected to without proper care. That step needs to be done. We need to actually put people in care that are in need of it. Madam Speaker, this other photo here, this is my friend Anthony. This is my friend Anthony Thompson. Now, if you've worked in urban renewal in Engliston, you will know of Anthony Thompson, because in my time as a Rotarian, we were donating food to the Urban Renewal Center after a number of the homes burnt down in evening's catastrophe. And I had actually been working to deter him from continuously going to my aunt's house, begging her, an elderly woman, for money at the door. So I knew what he looked like. And when he saw me, he was hesitant. But now when he sees me, I mean, he's outside of my law office in this picture. And this was taken 2 nights ago, Madam Speaker. I was closing up the office, still at my computer, and I heard a noise outside my window. And you find, it's par for the course in St. Anne's, Madam Speaker, to find, a cardboard box underneath a covered patio in the morning. Someone's, especially on these commercial properties on Village Road, someone's been there, and there was a cough. I looked out the window, and this guy was kicked back, laid back, so comfortable. He looked like Fabio on a cover of a book from the 1980s, He was just perfectly posed. But I went out there, Madam Speaker, and I already had money set aside to give him. He told me that he was going to the island. This was the time that he was going to turn his life around. I gave him the money, and I was happy to talk to him. Once he starts talking, he doesn't really stop talking until you clearly enter your vehicle and close the door. But he's not a harmful person to my knowledge, Madam Speaker. He's persistent. And before I took his photo, I asked him if he had ever been to Sandilands, and he said he had, and I did get his permission. I told him that, I wanted his photo because we're debating the mental health bill in the House of Assembly, and I told him that I'd call his name. But he's an individual that isn't in a situation like these persons, at least not now or possibly ever. I've never known him to be in that situation. But he needs help, and I think there have been efforts to try and help him in the past with job placement, but obviously he kind of prefers, in my opinion, a bit of the nomadic life. But as efforts expand under the mental health bill and the initiatives under the Health and Wellness Ministry, Madam Speaker, hopefully we'll go past finding more accommodation for the individuals that truly need it, to helping the individuals that have the ability to be employed, and find the ways to guide them, ensuring that they remain employed. Madam Speaker, I'm now going to look at the mental health bill in some detail. I think it's a very good bill, Madam Speaker. It's a lot of writing. But right away, there are some nuggets in it that are beneficial to the public and are, overall beneficial to the public. But the first one, because it's been so relevant for me in this short period of time that I've been a member of Parliament, is Section 67. And I'm going to read some of these sections because I think that the public needs to know, because they're not going to have access to this right now, and they're listening to 39 people speak for 30 minutes. It would be good for them to have an idea what the actual bill states. Maybe it's an idea that when there is a parliamentary website, bills tabled here get uploaded right away so the public can start reviewing and talking to their members of Parliament. Madam Speaker, Section 67, persons with mental illness loitering in a public place. A police officer shall, A, on being informed by a member of the public that a person loitering in a public place appears to be exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness, or on observing that person loitering in a public place is satisfied that the person appears to have a mental illness, and so the police officer shall also convey such person to the nearest health facility or mental health facility for examination and assessment. A couple of things from this section, which is a very important section. A couple of things come out of this section that I'm going to speak to now, Madam Speaker. And the first is when a police officer from the Royal Bahamas Police Department is called to deal with someone that has a mental issue, they'll likely go down and do an assessment first. If you do it during the week, with today's resources, if you do it during the week, not on a Friday, or definitely not Saturday and Sunday, if you do it during the week, the facility, I think it's on Collins Avenue, is likely to be open and staffed so that they can assess the individual and determine where that individual can or should go from there. So if they're open during the week and there are individuals around, they should be open during the weekend. And then the facility that's assessed them should not be left with them after the assessment's done. They should be able to move them to more beds in Sandilands or to the facility that might be built in Grand Bahama, or the private care facilities that have received the certification as a mental health facility from the Commissioner, from the Minister of National Security and the Minister of Health. So that's the first issue, is that saying that the police shall, in other words, they must convey such person to the nearest health facility. Saying that this is something they must do, we have to support them so that when they get the individuals there, they're going to be taken over out of their care and into the care of proper healthcare providers. But what this does is, in all of those instances that I spoke to earlier at Montague Foreshore, that's a public space. Those individuals were clearly loitering. They clearly had mental illness issues. Now with this section, I can call the Royal Bahamas Police Force, refer them to the section, and they can go down there, they can pick up the individual. They know that they don't need me to come in and make a complaint. The second point that came to me out of this section, Madam Speaker, and this is where I'd like consideration to be given to a possible amendment, especially that we now have a week for the Minister of Health to arrive, is that this speaks to, I'd ask you to protect me if it gets rough, Madam Speaker. It says that a police officer shall, on observing that person loitering in a public place. So this addresses persons that have mental health issues that are in public places. But I could see this section being read by the police as saying, well, if that's private land, that's not public space, we can't do nothing. This is not our problem, you're on your own. Or we can do something, but you got to come down and make a complaint. And then maybe that complaint comes with a further requirement that you got to come and give evidence in court. However it may be, if we could amend this section so that it says a police officer shall, on observing that person loitering in a public place or a private place not being their own, is satisfied the person appears to have mental illness, and then it goes on, convey such person to the nearest health facility or mental health facility. I think that would really encompass every situation that the public would want police assistance in, and would not put us where we are right now with this uncertainty as to who can do what, when, and how. So, Section 67B. Actually, A and B, because both speak to public place. So, public place or private place not being their own. Madam Speaker, I have a little under 10 minutes left. And everything is going well, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, we have Section 9 of the Act, which is one of the sections that speaks to the right of persons with mental health issues. And this is Section 9, the right to live in the community. No problem with that, Madam Speaker. But Section 9 reads, subject to admission to a mental health facility by order of the court in the interest of that person's health or of the public safety, or to a voluntary or facilitated admission to a mental health facility, no person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness shall be denied the right to live in and be a part of the community. Madam Speaker, I don't have any problem with that, and I know that everyone here, I would think, has no issue with that either. However, there have been instances in St. Anne's, in the Camperdown area, which is also part of my constituency, Madam Speaker, where individuals have been reported to have been seen along the main Camperdown Road doing the business of self-pleasure and sometimes making direct eye contact. Now, Madam Speaker, we've seen the individuals that have shown up. And Madam Speaker, there are instances where the individuals are known to live in the area. So I think that we have to be careful where, yes, people are free to live in the area, but when there is a extensive enough department under the ministry overseeing these things, the fact that an individual is cleared to live in their community one day doesn't mean that someone from the Ministry of Health and Wellness shouldn't check on them periodically, maybe annually, just to make sure that what they agreed to do when they left after their assessment, they're still abiding to. And it's a serious issue, Madam Speaker, especially, as I said, in St. Anne's. The Camperdown area has the equestrian stables. It also has men and women that are walking. And I'm not the type of man who approaches another man or person when they're doing that type of thing, Madam Speaker. But in this case of the right to live in the community, you also have some individuals who aren't acting offensively in the manner I've just described, but maybe because medication hasn't been taken, they're acting quite aggressively, and they're out and about in their immediate neighborhood, and it does put residents in fear of their lives. And just like when I was saying, you contact the police and they want to help, but it's never going to get anywhere because they'll just be back out on the street again if there's no place to put them at Sandilands. The neighbors end up having to live with this level of fear, which is fine for no one. Really, I shouldn't say it's fine. It's not fine. But maybe out of understanding, they go on and they do their best to adapt to it. But I think we saw recently this year, where a man killed their uncle or their best friend. And that was an instance where obviously he had been able to carry himself in a manner which wasn't a great risk, or maybe had shown some signs of risk. But he ended up brutalizing of a known person. And that's not something that we should be taking lightly. But this act is good because it addresses a lot of those things. We need more resources in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And I'll do my best, if the money keeps rolling in, to support any increased budget that Ministry of Health and Wellness comes up with to address these issues. Madam Speaker, the act is good because it addresses advanced directives, as well as the ability to nominate other representatives. To act, you can nominate persons to act for you if a time comes and you're no longer mentally capable to handle your business. In a lot of instances, I think in just about everyone's family, you have a family member, a friend who catches Alzheimer's, or just because of age, the memory goes. In the legal field, we've done documents called enduring powers of attorney, so that when that time comes and the doctor diagnoses them as having no longer the ability to handle their business affairs, that enduring power of attorney comes into effect. For the benefit of constituents, Madam Speaker, diagnosis will continue to be done by a medical practitioner. There's provisions for facilitated admissions to mental health facilities as well as health facilities. Madam Speaker, I'm being mindful of my available time unless you at this point wish to grant me more. Madam Speaker, there's also provision for emergency treatment. So this emergency treatment, Madam Speaker, goes back to the real issues that I've been dealing with, where the persons do need help. Emergency treatment under Section 31, subsections 1 and 2, subsection 1. Notwithstanding other provisions of this Act, care and treatment for mental illness may be provided by any medical practitioner. So this is the one time that I've seen under the Act where in an emergency, any medical practitioner can render treatment. Other than that, it's meant to be a mental health professional. So notwithstanding other provisions of this Act, care and treatment for mental illness may be provided by any medical practitioner or other mental health professional to a person either at a health facility, mental health facility, or in the community with or without the consent of the person, if it is immediately necessary to prevent death or irreversible harm to the person or serious harm to himself and others. And then it describes in subsection 2 that any emergency treatment can include transportation of the person with mental illness to a health facility or mental health facility, and that emergency treatment shall be limited to 72 hours, after which time the person must be reassessed. There are provisions under this that deal with restraint, Madam Speaker, as well as seclusion. I expect seclusion to be when you put them in their own space that they cannot come out of. Restraint in both cases, Madam Speaker, is meant to be for a period not exceeding 3 hours unless it's deemed that further restraint is needed. Now, I want to conclude with a bit of advice from my former boss, Madam Speaker. So I'm going to jump through a few of these very organized pink tabs and get to what needs to be discussed as I conclude, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you have 36 persons in custody with mental illness. Where a person in custody who has been diagnosed with or is exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness, the officer in charge of a prison or other place where he is detained shall make an application within 48 hours of his becoming aware to the psychiatrist in charge of the mental health facility or to a responsible medical officer of a health facility for his transfer to the facility for examination and assessment by a psychiatrist, or where a psychiatrist is not available, by a medical practitioner or other mental health professional. So, Madam Speaker, once this act comes into effect, I think the argument is that all of those individuals at Her Majesty's prison need to be referred for psychiatric care, and they shouldn't remain at Her Majesty's prison after such referral, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, by the act, from my good friend and former boss, Section 69, Madam Speaker, penalty for improper, this is it, Madam Speaker, it's roughly all that I need. Madam Speaker, penalty for improper detention of a person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness. Any person who, A, willfully detains in a health facility or mental facility any person who is diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of a mental illness otherwise than in accordance with this act, or unlawfully detains in any place not being a health facility or mental health facility any person diagnosed with or exhibiting symptoms of mental illness commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $1,000 or to imprisonment for 2 years or to both such fine and imprisonment. So, Madam Speaker, that's 80 persons, that's 80 offenses at Her Majesty's prison. Those people technically by this act, in my opinion, will need to be removed if, as the Guardian reported, they are suffering from mental illness, Madam Speaker. It comes with a penalty of imprisonment of 2 years or a fine of $1,000. And here's the kick, Madam Speaker. No prosecution under this section shall be commenced except by or with the consent of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Well, my boss was previously critical of the Director of Private Prosecutions. I'm just looking out for him, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with those things, with these additional resources, and with my mentors' collaborative work to get that amendment in there, I give my full support to this bill, and I think that the acting Prime Minister has done a good job so far this afternoon. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
For my MP, and I live in Camperdown, and nobody's made eye contact with me doing anything yet. But for the edification of my Member of Parliament and the Bahamian public, it is proposed for the first time, very shortly, that the Bahamas Department of Correction will have on its medical staff a psychiatrist, a psychiatric medical officer, and a psychologist. It is also proposed in the new high medium prison to have a psychiatric housing unit that will house all persons who have disorders that require treatment, and is a facility that can be designated a mental health facility. We are very cognizant of what the rules we are making requires, and we're moving expeditiously, even before it is legislated, to take steps to comply with its regime. And I should say, somebody pleasuring themselves publicly is a crime, and they really should call the police.
The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for West Granbahama.
Madam Speaker, just for the member for St. Anne's, you had mentioned the Attorney General. He's not a member of this place, but he will be in the other place when the bill arrives there. But he's away now on government business.
Thank you. I was actually also asking, since we're answering, who is the acting Attorney General at this time? Mr. Sandoval?
Yes, sir.
He's a fine gentleman, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Sorry, ma'am.
As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Pinewood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the great people of the Pinewood constituency to lend their voice to this piece of legislation, this important piece of legislation, the Mental Health Bill 2020. Madam Speaker, in my contribution today, early on with regards to Tropical Storm Nicole, I failed to mention the works of ZNS. And I got a call earlier today informing me of my faux pas, of which I have no excuse, being the minister responsible for ZNS. No one covers the Bahamas better. And so to those fine staff at ZNS, I thank you for the exceptional work that you did and that you continue to do. Madam Speaker, before I get into my contribution, I would like to inform the residents of the Pinewood constituency that our branch meeting will be held next week, Monday, November 28th, 2022 at Cleveland East at 7 p.m. We'll be treated to an address by my MP, the Member of Parliament for Elizabeth. Yeah, she is in high demand. Madam Speaker, also with regards to, we will be having some Thanksgiving functions next week, and particularly for those residents of A&A and Twilight Homes for the Aged, where we plan to provide some meals and for others. We'll also discuss the Christmas events at that same meeting. Madam Speaker, with regards to this bill, Madam Speaker, it was sometime last year, I got a call from the MP from Golden Gates, who asked me to reach out to a young lady whose brother I knew very, very well. Right after that, I saw a video of a police fatal shooting in Sunshine Park. I'm not casting any aspersions on the police. They were doing their job. But I want to mention the individual who died in that episode. He and I were best friends from grade 7 to grade 12 at S.C. McPherson and then A.F. Hadley. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, he was 7-1A, 8-1A, 9-1A, 10A1, 11A1, 12A1. He took and passed BJCs in grade 8, when that was not common back then, including the sciences, and passed with high grades. He took GCEs in grade 11 and passed with high grades. He was on the basketball team, the volleyball team. He ran track. He was a debater. His name was Kirkland Wilson, known also to the member for Marco City, who were also at that time. And one of the worst kept secrets in Sunshine Park and Golden Gates was that Kirk suffered from mental illness. This was a man who, in his younger age, in particular his school age, was brilliant, had his full life ahead of him. Some decisions that were made, albeit self-inflicted, led him down a path that he never recovered. When he was good, he would attend my office right there on Shirley Street, and we would speak for hours. When I would visit my dad in Sunshine, in Golden Gates, he would come there, and we'd always talk about the talent that he had, the choices that were made. And it was so sad to see an individual that had so much talent to meet his demise in such a way. For some individuals, he was just somebody who the police took out for actions that he had committed. But for those like myself and the MP for Marco City, he was by far one of the brightest in SC and in AF. And so I'm sure that my story is not the only story in this place, Madam Speaker. We all have family members or friends who, if there may have been intervention, if there may have been treatment, their lives or their path of their life would go in a completely different direction. Madam Speaker, mental health is a subject that is gaining global attention, and mental illness is now a global phenomenon. Mental illness has been a human struggle for thousands of years. And I think it's safe to say that mental health will be with us for the foreseeable future. In some culture, it is taboo. In some cultures, again, it has a variety of interpretation, from being called a demon, to possession, to witchcraft. When there's a lack of education and information in societies around the world, these situations lead us to individuals being marginalized. And when people are marginalized, Madam Speaker, we know what the end result is. Madam Speaker, there was a global rise in mental problems as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions associated with it. The lockdowns and other restrictions on freedom have made some very negative consequences. One of the most notable consequences of COVID-19 restrictions was the sharp rise in depression, which in some cases led to suicide. Madam Speaker, we heard all of the stories. Depression, too, is just another form of mental illness, Madam Speaker. But depression has not been marked a problem in the Bahamas. The Bahamas is a happy place, Madam Speaker, a place where people from all over the world have on their list of things to do before they die. Madam Speaker, the Bahamas is not known for a high rate of mental illness and particularly suicide. Indeed, we are known the world over for our happy and friendly disposition. However, Madam Speaker, this happy state has been slowly changing for a number of years, and many factors have contributed to this change. The Bahamas does not exist in isolation, Madam Speaker. The Bahamas is a member of a global community, and what affects that community now affects us. Madam Speaker, the Mental Health Act is currently part of the existing statute of laws in the Bahamas, was promulgated in 1969. It has been amended several times since it first was enforced. But, Madam Speaker, the status quo, being what it is, requires us to make a more comprehensive approach in addressing the mental health issues in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, as it stands now, we are lagging behind the science and acquired knowledge as it pertains to mental health. The reason why we are repealing the Mental Health Act is because it has also become somewhat archaic. It no longer effectively answers to the need of the modern-day Bahamas. And the usual patchwork is not the most effective way to answer to the needs of the Bahamas. As I stated a while ago, the government has decided to repeal the existing act and replace it with a more substantive piece of legislation which will respond more effectively to the needs of our society. Madam Speaker, mental health is a problem growing in the Bahamas and in Nassau in particular. This is true in every demographic of our society. But what is most troubling for me, Madam Speaker, is the growing number of young people with mental illness. Many young people are walking the streets, Madam Speaker, and it seems a new mentally challenged person joins the ranks every day. Madam Speaker, as stated earlier in here, during that walk in my constituency last week, where we had just some rain, I visited a particular home, through a corner that I won't name. And I was amazed at the story that was told. A young lady with 3 children who had resettled in Nassau from Abaco. And the concern most of the mother towards her 12-year-old child was that during the rain, every time it rains or there's any clap of thunder, her child goes into a shell. She panics. She thinks that it is Dorian being repeated all over and over again. And I'm sure that this story is a story that many of our fellow MPs in here go through on a daily basis. Madam Speaker, I had a call from the Member of Parliament for Marco City. And it related to a gentleman who provided counseling for Dorian victims. And 3 years later, his invoice, I am still trying to sort out. And that tells you, Madam Speaker, in this country, what we take even as leaders, the treatment or the providing of counseling to those who are suffering as a result of mental health. And I hope moving forward, Madam Speaker, with this passage of this piece of legislation, invoices that are provided to be paid by those professionals who give service, exemplary service, important service to the treating of those individuals who have suffered either natural events or other would be given priority. Madam Speaker, there are a growing number of street people in Nassau. People who live on the streets, some in cars or some in abandoned buildings. You can tell by their demeanor and presentation that they are having serious mental challenges. And there can be any number of reasons why they end up on the streets. But I am not interested in why. What the government's concern is in presenting this piece of legislation to Parliament is to provide a respectable level of care to those citizens who are having mental challenges. This is not a simple problem, Madam Speaker, but we cannot afford to ignore it or treat it as how we have been treating it for decades. I am pleased that my colleagues in the Cabinet have decided to take on the challenge of addressing mental health in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, this, as stated earlier, has gone across previous administrations, both PLP and FNM, and the government is continuous. And I put that in there to say that we are all united in this endeavor to include for treatment and care those marginalized in our society. And being a part of what was referred to earlier by Golden Gates as the party of the people, it is great pleasure and pride, Madam Speaker, that we present this piece of legislation because we are all here in our season to do the best that we can for as much as we can, for as long as we can. Madam Speaker, this bill seeks to empower the government through its agencies to deal effectively with this issue. And Madam Speaker, in order to deal effectively with this problem, we need a proper bureaucratic structure to administer and manage the problem of mental health in the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, there are varying types and degrees of mental health. Some cases can be cured, while others can only be treated. But what this bill is seeking to do is ensure all of the necessary components are in place to deal with the problem of mental health effectively. This initiative includes hiring of human resources, especially professionally qualified persons, to treat persons with mental diseases. And this brings me to my next point, Madam Speaker. As the minister responsible for the National Insurance Board, we have also seen at OHSU at Carmichael claims being filed by residents, people who pay international insurance, who claims are not just for physical trauma, but also mental. And it is my hope and pray that on the passing of this, we just don't just lump everybody together to say that they are being lazy. Because there are individuals in our society out there who have been crying and been crying for years, and those cries have only fell on deaf ears because we as leaders have failed to adequately recognize and deal with the issue of mental health. There's one thing that we must always do in this country, Madam Speaker. We must uphold the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is the foundation of our democracy, and we must respect it. Respect for our Constitution also means respecting the rights of all citizens and residents to those fundamental rights and freedom that are enshrined in our Constitution. We have to remember that all of those fundamental rights and freedom are inclusive. Everyone is entitled to them, and without them, we have no democracy. Madam Speaker, persons with mental health challenges are equally entitled to these very same constitutional protections. Many persons who suffer from mental illness also suffer abuse in the violation of their constitutional rights. Madam Speaker, this bill seeks to offer protection to persons with mental issues. There was a time, Madam Speaker, when people were afraid of people with mental illness. One of the things that we as a society need to do is invest in education of our people about mental illness. This bill that is before Parliament today will go a long way in the protection of the constitutional rights of persons with mental illness. Madam Speaker, I am hopeful that with the passage of this bill into law, many of those who live on the streets will be given the help they need. After they would have been treated, perhaps they can again be welcomed back into homes of their families. For those who are not able to function as productive members of the society, they may have to be institutionalized. But what we want to avoid, Madam Speaker, is the abandonment of persons with mental illness to their own fate. It seemed obvious to me that with proper care, some of these people can become productive citizens in our community again. Madam Speaker, persons with mental health disabilities and disorders have proven to be productive citizens in many developed countries. According to a study done by 3 members of the Psychiatry Department of Duke University Medical Center, 18 out of 37 presidents of the United States met the criteria suggesting mental illness. 27 of them experienced symptoms while they were in office. Madam Speaker, we are talking about the presidency of the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world. But, Madam Speaker, much research has gone into the subject of mental abnormalities. We in the Bahamas have to understand that persons with mental illness can have great value if they are given a chance. We may have a few savants among us, but we will never know unless and until we in the Bahamas learn properly to diagnose and properly treat mental illness. So, Madam Speaker, what is a savant? Kim Peek was a savant, Madam Speaker. Kim Peek had a rare mental condition called savant, which gave him amazing talents, including a phenomenal memory. It was estimated that he retained 98% of everything he read. And Madam Speaker, he reads a lot. He was the most amazing mental recall date, and yet he could do absolutely nothing for himself and had to be taken care of like a child. The movie Rain Man, starring Dustin Hoffman, was a telling of Kim Peek's story. Madam Speaker, there's a story about Stephen Wiltshire. Stephen Wiltshire is a British citizen of African ancestry. His mental capacity was thought to be so badly diminished that he was institutionalized. The only thing he was known for was fits of screaming and tantrum throwing. He was incommunicable. But in that institution, he was treated to specialized cars. It took a long time for them to realize that the window of hope they were looking for. Then one day, Madam Speaker, it happened. By chance, he made a drawing on a piece of paper that astonished everyone in the care facility. He had given more paper, and he continued to draw with remarkable details and scenes he had seen in London. He continued to receive specialized care and eventually learned to talk. He was challenged to produce drawings of more and more complex structures. He would gaze upon them for a few minutes, then reproduce in minute detail. His last great feat was in the city of London. He was flown over the city of London and for about 15 minutes in a helicopter. After the flight, he went back to his drawing board and drew an aerial view of the city of London with the most intricate of details. The specialized care that Stephen received at this institution has turned him into a naturally functioning citizen in the city of London. His skills are widely sought after, and he is highly paid for his services. He now travels wherever he wishes within the city of London, and if you don't know who he is, you will see him as regular and average. Madam Speaker, it's my position that maybe not on that scale, but if we have institutions here in which we can give treatment to Bahamian citizens, we may have our own Stephen Wilshire living among us, someone who may have been on the street or living in an abandoned building. And that's why it is imperative for us as leaders to take care of those who are vulnerable or who we think may not have anything to offer. But given a chance, given treatment, we may be very surprised in what they can do for the betterment, not only of themselves, but for the whole country. Madam Speaker, some cases of mental illness are mild, and persons with such conditions can be productive citizens. And in the case of savants, they can do more than so-called normal people do. Then there are those with mental disability called autism. Again, this class of abnormal mental capacity can sometimes perform at genius levels in whatever they have a passion for. So you see, Madam Speaker, mental health is a very complex subject. But since many of us have loved ones with mental health challenges, we all have a responsibility to educate ourselves in the subject of mental health. And not only mental health, Madam Speaker, we need to put a focus on mental wellness. There are things that we all need in order to promote mental health. But in order to do this, the entire population needs to be educated on the subject of mental health. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I wish to register my support and the support of Pinewood for this piece of legislation. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Chair recognizes the honorable member for West
Madam
Palmer.
Speaker, with your lead, I'd wish to inform the House that with the side opposite concurrence, we are going to ask for an adjournment at this point so that we will resume next week, Wednesday, at 3 o'clock to continue this debate. But when we resume next Wednesday, Madam Speaker, we wish to resume at 10 a.m. with a joint session with members of the other place. That is, Madam Speaker, to observe and celebrate the 60th anniversary of women voting for the first time in the Bahamas. And we will set aside that morning to allow the women of our parliament from this place and the other place. They will conduct the session, Madam Speaker. And with your leave, Madam Speaker, I wish to move a resolution to allow for the same.
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker,
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with the provisions of the rules of this honorable House, I would like to move the following adjournment resolution. Resolved that the House at its rising do adjourn in a joint sitting with the Senate on Wednesday, 23rd of November, 2022 at 10 a.m. If I may obtain a seconder.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, it has been moved and seconded that this House at its rising do adjourn to Wednesday, 23rd of November, 2022 at 10 a.m. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is agreed. Final adjournment?
Madam Speaker, I now move for the House stand adjourned until Wednesday, November 23rd, 10 a.m.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded.
Adjourned until we can go back on the agenda.
It has been moved and seconded that this House do now adjourn. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is agreed. This House stands adjourned to a joint sitting with the Senate on Wednesday, 23rd of November, 2022 at 10 a.m.
All rise.
Thank you.